So, yes, I am from Richmond, California. Actually lived in San Pablo, but San Pablo is the little city that could. So, I am from the East Bay, born and raised.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And then tell us a little bit about how did you get into psychology, your educational background? How did this come about?
Yeah, so I grew up very quiet, actually. Lots of people who know me now would never believe that. But what I found was that I was really a good listener. And after going through and getting a bachelor's degree in human development and then going on and getting a master's degree in counseling psychology, which my initial intention was to become a therapist. And at that time, I decided that it was too hard. I couldn't do it. Just a lot to be able to hold, what my clients were going through. And then many years later, I earned a doctorate degree in psychology.
And so with that, sounds like a switch or a change of heart, I call it, in your career focus. Tell us a little bit of how you dove into where you are now, your expertise.
Yeah, so I started teaching back in 1998 at the community college level. I absolutely love the community college system. So teaching psychology, in addition to, because I'm very clear that I was put on the planet to empower girls and women. And we'll get to my unique approach for doing that. But in addition to teaching, have been keynote speaker, workshop speaker at a lot of conferences, organizations, and that sort of thing. But probably about 10 years ago, I started teaching the psychology of women. And that's when I really began to delve into the not only the physical, but the emotional experiences, the social experiences, the spiritual experiences of girls and women as it relates to their menstrual cycle. So that's how I got there. I realized that, of course, we are all familiar, unfortunately, with the negative stigma that's out there about the menstrual cycle. And I started thinking, well, this is a system, a bodily system that is required for the human species to continue. So why is it that it has such a negative connotation? Why does it not receive more respect or any respect? And so I started just really, really delving into that and realizing that there'd been so much undereducation, miseducation, folks being misled about the menstrual cycle. And I really wanted to do something about that in terms of body positivity.
Mm-hmm. So let's dive into the body positivity and the research around with the menstrual cycle. And so what is some of the myths? And then what is the research saying today?
Yeah. Yeah. So it looked like you were going to ask something else.
I was, but I had to stop because I get so excited. I was like, hold on, let me stop there. And then I'll still ask it though.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest myths is that the menstrual cycle is something that's gross, that's dirty, that's disgusting, is repulsive, or that people who menstruate are not able to be trusted when they're bleeding. They're not able to lead, organizations, when they're bleeding. So I think that's probably one of the biggest myths. In terms of research, there's this wonderful organization called the Society of Menstrual Cycle Research, and they house just so much research out there. And some of the things I love, early on, there would be lots of research about taboos, about how people who menstruate are treated when they're on their cycle. So you're not supposed to go in the kitchen. You're not supposed to handle utensils. Some of that stuff is like real in terms of people's ideology and what they were thinking. Over the years, there's been lots of research on the representation of the menstrual cycle on TV. Everybody watches TV. TV influences a lot of what we think about things. And some of that research has shown that a lot of the representation has been on white, cisgendered folks. It's like, okay, well, that's a population who menstruates, but there's a lot of other people out there who menstruate as well. Some of the other research looks at, in a menstrual health setting, in a therapeutic setting, whether the therapist is able to effectively broach the topic of menstruation and how it might be impacting someone's experience. So if they can't broach it, then that might not be the best therapeutic match. So there's just a lot of exciting research out there about the menstrual cycle.
That sounds very interesting. On one hand, it's used as dehumanizing, and then the other foot is used as empowering.
Yes.
So it's such a range there. So one of the things, is there any research today about how women can approach, like, for example, because I hear the examples you were mentioning about, like, the workplace, at home, like those are a lot of family taboos or work taboos that happen. Is there any changes in just dynamics on that end?
Things are definitely changing for the better, which is really, really nice. So, for example, you'll see the latest legislation where now there's 5 states in the country that require that period care products be offered at schools. California is one of those states. Normalizing the conversation is really, really helpful in terms of reducing that negative stigma, making it normal to talk about these things amongst various family members. So things are definitely improving. There's even research out there about menstrual joy, which would be a surprise to a lot of people. Like, what? So there are some folks who, when they're on their menstrual cycle, they feel a sense of like cognitive clarity, more creativity. It's like really, really interesting, in terms of what they report. So things are improving. I'm really appreciating the awareness on period poverty, which has to do with access or lack of access to period care products. And that awareness is really sprouting globally. So there are lots of efforts to provide period care products to people here in the United States and then around the world as well, because there are some people who financially cannot afford to purchase what they need to take care of themselves. So that is a big area of focus as well.
That sounds great, which really transitioned us into the next part, which is talking about your programs that you offer, which talks about educating and building rapport and relationship, having language. I'm gonna just have you share. I'm not gonna spill the beans, people. So let's start with your first program, Power of the Period program.
Yes.
Share a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So it's Power to the Period. And where that came from, or where that stemmed from, was initially my desire to help tweens and teens to understand their bodies. A lot of the embarrassment that is out there, a lot of the body negativity that's out there stems from the fact that young people do not understand their bodies. They don't know even why they are menstruating. They have no clue, that they haven't been taught. It's not their fault. So I started with young teens and tweens and their female caregiver, so whether that was their mother, auntie, grandmother, whatever. And so in that particular workshop, we do some basic education around reproductive anatomy. I mean, for example, in one of my workshops, and we keep it real, so we're going to go there. So in terms of educating the young people about basic anatomy, one young person thought that the hole that she urinated from was the same opening that she bled from. Well, those are 2 different openings, right? And so having that sort of basic understanding and then educating them about why they are having menstrual cycles, the different phases, how to take care of themselves is so important. So in that Power to the Period workshop, It's a 4-hour workshop, and I am with the young people for the majority of that. And then their female caregiver joins at the end. And we do a beautiful sort of a mother-daughter rite of passage almost piece at the end, which is so amazing to witness. And what I learned from that is that the adults, the grown women, the grandmothers, the mothers, the aunties had a lot of residue about their own menstrual cycle, their own, how they were taught or not taught. I'm currently working on a project called the Period Stories Project, and where I'm interviewing people of a variety of ages, ethnicities, gender orientations, all of that. And some of the grown folks who menstruate were taught nothing about their cycle, not a thing before it started. So you can just imagine you're 11 and you go through the bathroom and you see blood in the crotch of your panties. And so some of these, when they have that experience, is very traumatic. Like, because they received no education, they literally thought they were dying, like literally. So I just really wanted to address that, and that's how I started with Power to the Period. And I've had a wonderful opportunity to facilitate many versions of those with a couple of local sororities. So the Sacramento chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and then also the Berkeley Bay Area alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. And it's been just fantastic. But then, as I mentioned before, some grown women had some residue around it, some trauma around it. It brings up a lot of stuff for a lot of people. So we're going to get into what I developed for them. But it's just really, really important that young people understand their bodies. That's where the empowerment comes from.
And also understanding their story and how that is going to be a lived experience until, what is it called? Oh my gosh. When you stop having your period.
Menopause?
Menopause. That's a word. Yes. And so to be able to identify that as your journey and understand it, that speaks to the empowerment that you're doing. Can you, before we transition to the next program, is there, what is significant about creating touching moments between moms and daughters? I hear that you talked about how the moms or the female elder identified, how was those moments happening?
Yeah. So a lot of times, even for moms, female caregivers, when their daughter, niece starts their period, a lot of women don't know what to say. They don't know how to make it a positive experience. So there's a lot being left out in terms of the education. And so from those mother-daughter connection moments, what the young people are saying was how powerful it was to hear their mom's story about when she was her age and started her period, because they had never heard it before. It had never been shared. What the adults are saying is how powerful it was for me to share my story with my beloved, child or niece. And so just the sharing of that is incredible. It's absolutely incredible because young people, they want to see our humanness. That's a part of how we learn. But a lot of times as, adults, we're so busy parenting, trying to keep the stuff together. We don't necessarily make it a priority to share our stories, but there are teachable moments in our stories. And so the connection, there's another piece where I have the female caregivers to bring a picture of themselves when they were the age of their daughter currently. So they bring a picture of themselves at 11 or 8 or whatever it is and share that and tell their period story. And it's just absolutely beautiful. The mothers also bring a letter or a card for their niece or their daughter, and we do a piece where they read it to them and present it to them. So that kind of connection is just so amazing. And I'm just going to say not enough of it is happening.
Mm-hmm. And also it changes, after your workshop, it changes the dynamics at home. Just one little thing, changes a whole host of things, which is really great. Like you're providing a safe space to have a important conversation that's going to go on in the home for a minute.
Yes, and
Yes.
that's what we want.
Yes. And so let's talk about your next program, which is for grown women. Rock with your menstrual rhythm. Did I say that right? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
You
Let's
know,
go.
you got to rock with it. So, as I was mentioning earlier, from my work with the tweens and teens, I realized that adult women had some residue and some area of healing around their own cycle. They were carrying a lot of that negative, thinking about it, that it's a curse, that is, something to be dealt with. And I thought, okay, so there's room for this population as well. So in the Rock with Your Menstrual Rhythm workshop, I really bring in how this is spiritual work, particularly in terms of understanding what's called the red thread. And the red thread represents how our mother line was initiated with these different areas of life. So how our mother was initiated, how her mother was initiated, and so on and so on. And so even though if we don't know all of those stories, they're still impacting us. They're impacting our experiences. And when I say initiated, it includes our birth story as an initiation, when we become an adolescent as an initiation, how we became a mother as an initiation, right? How we reach menopause as an initiation. All of those impact our experiences, whether we know the stories or not. So we do a little reflecting about, what were they taught? Or what were they not taught? What was said? Because a lot of times the shaming came as a part of the education.
Say more.
Right.
Say more.
I just
Say
wanted to
more.
let that land.
Like, that landed on me. Say more.
The education that they did receive, which was, okay, you need to stay clean. These are your pads. And now you can get pregnant. Keep your legs closed. Don't be out there fast. Right? So the shaming was built into the education. So unfortunately, how they were introduced to the menstrual cycle already had negative seeds on it that then get nourished and fortified, and they get water poured on them, so the negativity just continues to grow. So in the Rock with Your Menstrual Rhythm workshop, I teach these grown folks the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, because a lot of people don't know that there are 4 phases. They think they're either bleeding or not. And so when we understand those 4 phases, they can understand that the menstrual cycle is actually a guide for self-care. It's not something to despise. It's not something to think is an inconvenience. Some folks in this industry actually consider the menstrual cycle to be a vital sign. So just like we check your blood pressure, your pulse, your breathing rate, that the menstrual cycle is another sign of a person's overall health. And so as a part of learning about the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, what they communicate, how to take care of yourself, I also encourage participants in that workshop to create a self-care plan for each of the 4 phases. And it is absolutely amazing. And so the women, the people who menstruate, come out of that workshop feeling empowered. They're like mind blown as far as, what they learned. It's a miracle, which I consider to just be a shift in perception. So that's what I'm offering them, a shift in perception, and it's absolutely fantastic.
It definitely shifted mine, let me tell you. But I do appreciate it's like you're having them unlearn what they learned to be able to shape what they can shape with their story or their narrative, which is pretty powerful, because that is just the matriarch. It's like their kids and their kids and their grandkids and the nieces and nephews. Like, it's just a whole ripple effect. It's just so, this is great. This is amazing. This is amazing. But it also talks about the importance of knowing your body and knowing how it works, and knowing although you may not know everything, it's okay. You can learn. You don't have to treat it as taboo because society says it's taboo. It's not taboo, So I think that's really, really great. Um, it's just really, really great. If you could share like one story of someone's shift in mindset in that class that speaks out to you.
So I told you I like to go there, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to pull it out. I'm trying to pull it in.
So there are a couple. So in terms of educating young people about their bodies, when it comes to folks who were born female, and in terms of learning and understanding their genitalia, when a person who is born female is standing naked and they look down, there's not much to see. As opposed to a person who was born male, when they look down, their penis is easily accessible, right? So when they're 1 and 2, they get to play and explore and like, what's this new toy down here, right? So it's almost like their education about their body is easier. For people who are born female, when they look down, it's you don't see much, right? And so learning about our bodies is not as easily accessible. So because of that, I encourage folks, and you can do this, young folks, do it with your mom or not, whatever, but go in the bathroom, close the door, sit on the floor, open the legs, and get a mirror and look and see what's there in terms of understanding the parts of your vulva, which a lot of people use vagina and vulva interchangeably, but they're two different things, right? So the vulva is going to include the clitoris, it's going to include the vaginal opening, it's going to include what some people call the curtains, the lips, right? Both sets. And so it is so important for us to understand what we have, right? What we're working with, what they're for, what they do. And so when I share that in some of the groups, initially there's a lot of laughter, right? There's a lot of that uneasiness, like, what? Go on the floor and get a mirror and look and see what's down there? Yes, because you don't know what you have. And it's part of like the secrecy. It's part of the unknowing. It's part of the miseducation. And when we can, shatter all of those barriers and shatter all of those blockages, then you can come and start to really, really appreciate your body. So that's been one of the major shifts is, yes, explore your body. Yes, right? So that's been one of them. And then I think another shift as far as female caregivers are or is that how important it is for them to share their stories with their young person. Sometimes as parents, we forget what it was like when we were 11 sometimes. We're so disconnected. We're in the busyness of parenting. And we sometimes forget about the mistakes we made, and we sometimes forget about the situations that we were in when we had to make some, interesting decisions, whether we were being propositioned for sex or drugs or to steal something, right? So we've made mistakes, and it is not helpful to hide those from our young people. It is just not. It is helpful to, share their stories and, have a moral of the story in mind when you share these stories with the young people, because they are teachable moments. They are important for those connecting conversations to be able to share, I'm human. And I was once 11, and these are some of the things that I faced, and these are the mistakes I made, and this is what I would do differently now, So those have been some of the sort of miracle shifts that have occurred from the workshops.
But also, like you said earlier, the humanness of our story, the humanness of like knowing our bodies and knowing what parts are what, and being okay with like, it's my body, I can look, it's okay. It's not shameful because I actually have these parts. So I think that's empowering within itself. And so let's talk about the dads.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. This is going to be pretty interesting. How's the dads? Let's dance.
Yes. So, sort of recapping the journey. So I started with, focusing on teens and tweens. Then I realized that, adult folks who menstruate have some areas of healing as well. Then I realized that there are a lot of dads who want to know how to support their daughters who are going through this adolescence journey, but they do not know how. And with, all of the stuff that we're talking about today, I just want to make sure no blaming. It's a societal, issue, right? So we're not placing blame anywhere. But a lot of folks who menstruate have been taught, due to the shaming, to keep it a secret, to not share it. You don't talk about it, with your partner, or you don't talk about it with anybody, like you keep it a secret. So because of that, boys and men are clueless. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand it. They can't explain it, right? And so a lot of times, when we don't understand something, it's quick to judge it negatively when we don't understand something. Or when, we're young, it's easy to make fun of things that we don't fully understand. And so that's how I started moving into the Dads Puberty Playbook.
All right.
Yes, the Dads Puberty Playbook masterclass. And again, that's for those devoted dads who want to know how to be involved, because research shows that when girls can actually feel their fathers distancing themselves as they're going through the adolescence journey. And that is because it's awkward for dads. It's hard for them to envision daddy's little girl becoming a young woman. It's hard for them to envision a little princess developing breasts and needing a bra, right? It's hard for them to imagine her having sex. So it's awkward. And, sometimes dads don't know, should they be involved, in this sort of education? Is it just the thing that mothers should do? So it's just awkward because it's not talked about, right? And so, but what I really want to emphasize is that dad's involvement is actually critical for daughter self-esteem. So we need dads to lean in to being very present, what I call using your special daddy mojo, being very present in the daughter's development versus distancing or leaning back because you don't know what to do or you don't know what to say. Bless their hearts. A lot of dads, they don't want to step on anybody's toes. They don't want to say the wrong thing, right? Because they haven't been educated. So with the Dads Puberty Playbook Masterclass, I am able to give them 3 keys to begin to break the ice in terms of having these sort of conversations, because my work with dads shows that what they want is they want their daughter to be able to come to him with anything. They want their daughter to feel comfortable coming to him, or they're really, really concerned or afraid of, her access to social media and how that's impacting her self-esteem, negatively, feeling like they need to keep up or look like, these people, who are on social media. And so the way that we can address those things, combat those things, is for dads to also share with their daughters their puberty story. Everybody has a puberty story, right? And so it's really, really important for dads to do that. And yes, it's going to feel uncomfortable. Yes, it is. And your daughter's self-esteem is worth it. Her mental health is worth it. Her, not feeling anxious about going to school when she's on her period is worth it. Her understanding her gifts and values, and that if she's propositioned for sex and she says no, it's worth it for her to know that dad still loves her, that she's still worthy, right? So it's really, really important for dads to be able to lean in here. And I'm really, really passionate about working with those dads that want to do that, those compassionate dads who are open-minded, who are dedicated, who will do anything for their daughters, because this is also spiritual work. It's parenting work. And so it's going to encourage dads to stretch themselves, to be thinking about feelings that they maybe have not ever thought about, or at least not in a long time. And so it's some work, but it is so worth it for the benefit of your daughter's well-being.
I love it. I love that how it's very complementary to the growth of a kid, and addresses what I want to say, maybe those missing parts that you didn't even know, like it didn't even existed. So like, for example, for me, I was brought up with both parents in the home. Somebody may not. Maybe they just had the dad or just the mom or two moms or two dads or whatever their dynamics is. That's still a part of the journey and the story that's going to develop that kid's self-esteem, how they feel about their bodies, how they feel like they're worthy or confident, what they're exposed to, what they have access to, how they best can communicate. And that with itself is just one thing we could solve in the world, is helping the confidence of our kids and how they grow up and how they feel as they go to school or as they go to work, which transitions us into your 4 seasons. So with that, with the program and with, and I'm just thinking about the work you're doing and educating girls who menstruate, women who menstruate, and then their dads or their supporters. How does this all work? Because it's different. It's so different. That's all I got to say. It's different, but it's a good different, but it's different.
Yes. Thank you for asking. It's a great difference. So it's important for everyone to understand the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. So regardless of your gender, your sexuality, your age, it's important because it's going to either impact yourself or it's going to impact a loved one. Boom, right? So the more you can understand this, the better. So what's important is that we realize that we are cyclical beings. So we operate according to a cycle. And I like to equate the menstrual cycle with the seasons, those seasons of the weather, right? Because everyone understands spring, summer, winter, fall. We know it's a cycle, right? We go through that every year. We go through the cycle, and we know that this is a pattern, and we know what comes after what, and we know what's going to happen, right? We know that in winter it's cold and the days are short, and we need to wear multiple layers, right? So we understand. So a lot of times I find it easy to sort of equate the menstrual cycle with what I call the inner season. So I'll just sort of, if it's okay, walk us through these.
Let's stroll through the park. Because I'm trying to get this.
Yes. So I'll start with the season of winter. All right. So we all understand, like I was saying, that in winter it's cold outside. We're wearing layers. We just want to eat warm, comforting foods. We want to be on the couch with some tea or some cocoa or something stronger, whatever's your thing, right? And so winter is equated with the phase of the menstrual cycle that most people are familiar with, the actual phase of where you're bleeding. So that's the menstrual phase of the menstrual cycle. And so that occurs roughly days 1 through 5 of the menstrual cycle. And it's also important, I say that because it's important for people who menstruate to track their cycle so that they understand what their normal is. So a little bit of back information is that on average, and I really, really stress average, the menstrual cycle takes about 28 days to complete. For some people, it's a little bit longer. For some people, it's less than that, right? And so the first day that you bleed is considered day 1 of the menstrual cycle. So you start counting from there. So when you're in the menstrual phase, the menstruation phase of the menstrual cycle, that is a phase for a lot of people. And I'm just going to speak in generalities because everybody is different, right? But for a lot of people, they want to be less social during that time. They want a little more alone time. Their body is requiring more rest, so they need a little bit more downtime, right? They need some of those comforting foods. The body tends to be a little bit low on magnesium, so there's where that craving for chocolate comes from. Dark chocolate is best, has the highest magnesium. So that is, that menstruation phase. It's sort of an indicator to slow down for most people. Let's take it slow. Let's reflect. People can have very interesting dreams during this particular phase of the cycle. So I encourage people to, log your dreams if you can. So that is winter, okay, when we're actually bleeding. That can occur anywhere from 5 days, 7 days again. It's just going to depend on each person. So we know what happens after winter, spring, right? When spring gets here, we're happy. It's warmer. It represents new beginnings, right? The flowers are blooming, right? That's spring. And spring is associated with the follicular phase. And so this is, again, depending on how long your winter lasted, how many days your winter lasted. This could be anywhere from days 8 to 14. I'm just kind of being rough because it depends on each person. And so during spring, this is a time where we tend to feel more active. We tend to have more energy. This is definitely a time where it's really helpful to be creative, to, get things done, right? During spring, it's new beginnings. Like, yes, I'm starting anew. I'm coming out. Let's do it, right? That's spring. The next phase is summer. We know summer comes after spring, and we are really happy when summer gets here. It's like it's hot out. We wearing less clothing, showing a little shoulder, right? The days are longer, so that means there's more productivity. So when we're in our menstrual summer, okay, that is equated to ovulation. And so ovulation has a lot to do with manifesting. So we tend to equate ovulation with, if you're trying to get pregnant, this is the time to get busy. Go for it, because this is when you will conceive, right? But it's much bigger than just having children. It's about manifesting in general. And it's really, really important, for people who really want to use the menstrual cycle as a guide for self-care. This is when you really want to start brainstorming new ideas for stuff, right? You want to start a new business or do something differently at school, or you have a new idea for something, right? This is the time to really get those things done and manifest those things. So this is like high productivity right here during ovulation. And so again, depending on, your first couple of phases, that might be anywhere from days 14 to 20, right? Just speaking in a general sense. And then the last phase of the cycle is fall. And, historically, when it comes to fall, fall in general is a time of like harvest, right? Reaping the benefits. So during this phase, it's time to begin slowing down a little bit. It's time to begin reflecting on all the good that has happened, in the previous days of this particular cycle. Like, acknowledge yourself, big and small, achievements, accomplishments, like really, really journal those if you don't already have a habit, of acknowledging those. But I want to spend a little time in fall, so this is the follicular phase, this is the luteal phase. I want to make sure I correct that. This is the luteal phase. But this is the phase that is associated with PMS. So if we have heard of that acronym, right, stands for premenstrual syndrome, has a bad rap. So the stereotype here is, she's being bitchy, she's being irritable, stay away from her, type thing. And I really would like to reframe that acronym instead of premenstrual syndrome to premenstrual self-care. And that is because this is definitely a time to up our self-care levels. This is a time to detox, to declutter. So not only, cleaning out closets and that type of stuff, right? But also decluttering toxic people, places, and things. So this is a time where, during the other phases of the cycle, in general, lots of people who menstruate are socialized to sort of not rock the boat, sort of make sure everybody's okay, to sweep our own desires and needs under the rug, to not let other people know when they've violated, when they've, overstepped a boundary to avoid conflict. And during this particular phase, the luteal phase, you're like, I'm not having it no more. So this is the time to assess what's not working, what doesn't work for you. And I would encourage people to really make a commitment to be assertive, not aggressive, but to be assertive during the other phases so that you're teaching people how to interact with you. You're teaching people what's cool with you and what's not. So they know all of that when you get to fall. So they know all of that when you get to the luteal phase. And instead of them walking on eggshells or feeling like I got to stay away from her, instead they can lean into your self-care. So if they have been paying attention to the patterns, they'll know like, okay, she might need her hot water bottle. Maybe she's having some cramps, or let me make her favorite tea, right? Or let me rub her feet. And so it's not, just about dads, supporting daughters, but this is helpful for romantic relationships, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, sister, brother, right? Friends, just friends. So it's really, really helpful for everyone to understand the 4 phases. And so that's why I call them the inner seasons.
That is phenomenal. Let me tell you, because I'm like, I need to change up. That's why I'm taking notes. Because this is beautiful. Like, this is so life-changing. I'm going to call all my sisters.
Yes.
But I digress. So that's my accountability step for this, okay? But I really appreciate how it's really changing the narrative of how someone feels while they're on their cycle. Right? Like before, during the 28 days, or in general, 28 days. Some folks are a little longer. But I like that there are different little action steps that you could actually take in regards to just your own well-being, but also teaching other people how to treat you while you're going through these moments during your cycle, which is beautiful.
Yes.
And you lay it out so nicely. Because the code word could just be winter. Hey, it's winter. It's winter.
There you go.
Don't play with me. It's winter. Everybody knows. Go get the dark chocolate. Okay? Where's the magnesium? I say this jokingly, but sometimes you got to add a little humor.
Yes.
Just a little bit of humor.
Absolutely.
Into this. And so I think I'm leaning into the next question, but what are some of the benefits of like fully understanding these seasons? I just listed out a couple, but anything that else you could share about when folks really understand these the seasons or the how this all works?
Yes. So I mentioned that the menstrual cycle is really a guide for self-care. So when you think about it like that, we have a built-in system that's teaching us how to take care of ourselves. It's built in. We just have to know the system, and we have to know what our body is saying. So just imagine if, a woman, a person who menstruates to the degree possible, books her calendar, schedules her calendar according to the phases. Like, okay, I'm going to be in winter here. I'm going to not do so much, right? I'm going to be in spring or, ovulation here. Okay, let's put a lot on the calendar here. This one I'm going to be, more social. Or, in fall, it's time for me to begin slowing down, my slow down piece. I'm going to do a little more journaling. I'm going to do a little more praying or meditating, what have you, right? This is spiritual work. I'm going to do a little bit of reflecting on what's working for me and what isn't, right? So the system is built in. And when we understand it, then we can sync our lifestyle with the cycle that we already have that's built in. So I want people to know that, this is a mental health matter. This is a public health matter. This is a wellness matter. This is a parenting matter. It's a fathering matter. It's a relationship matter. And so it just touches, or it can touch, so many people in so many different ways if they understand how to pay attention to the patterns and either supporting the person who's menstruating, or for the person who's menstruating, taking care of themselves and teaching other people about what they need.
And then the opposite, I would call it the opposite side of the spectrum, because I know, I'm going to speak for myself. Sometimes I have bad habits, okay? I have so many bad habits, okay? And so part of that affects like my relationship with people, or how I work, or with my sisters. And so can you share a little bit about the education of, I call it like reducing those bad habits, whether it's alcohol or eating the wrong foods, or doing, things that you typically probably wouldn't have done. Like how is that transition for some folks from like decreasing those habits to, increasing the habits of using the system that you laid out?
Yeah, yeah. Because thank you for asking, because some people aren't even aware that what they eat can impact their cycle. Like some people have no knowledge about that. So, definitely in winter and fall, it's really, really helpful to increase those veggies, increase those fruits, increase your water intake as well, decrease the sugar, possibly, decrease the caffeine, or at least the source of the caffeine, maybe shift to something like green tea instead of the caramel macchiato frappuccino thingy.
Ouch. Ouch. What's it say? If you can't say amen, say ouch. Ouch.
And like I was saying earlier, it's important for people to track their cycle so you know you're normal. And tracking the cycle includes tracking your food intake, right? So you can pay attention to how these different things are impacting your experience of your cycle. So for some people, alcohol makes the bleeding phase worse, either prolonging it or having intense cramps, making the cramps more intense. It's important to know that, as the body is shedding the endometrial lining that's coming out, it's contracting to push it out, right? To get rid of the lining that it doesn't need. And so it's important to track, what you're drinking as well, how much water. So there's that piece. And then there's, also the piece around the types of menstrual products that we're using, the type of period care products that we're using. More and more research has come out as of late about the toxic ingredients that are in period care products. I'm shaking my head because it's a shame. Right. That deserves a wow. So these products are being used in an area of our body that's highly sensitive and very absorbent. So if, for example, I'll just use a tampon as an example, some of the common tampons that are on the marketplace have chlorine in their cotton. Right, that phase. So that means we're absorbing that into our bodies. There are other ingredients that have been, associated with, on the low end, itching, sensitivity, to heavier bleeding, to reproductive issues on the more, severe end. So it's very important that whatever you are using is eco-friendly, is body-friendly, is non-toxic. And there are more companies out now that are offering these types of products. Womberly is one of them, Natural Care, Femly. There are period panties out now, and I smile because I wish those were out when I was 11. This makes things so much easier. These kids don't know how they got it these days. They got it easy. But even some of those, in terms of period apparel, have had ingredients in them that have been toxic for the body. So you definitely want to make sure that what you're using, it supports a healthy womb, right? Supports your cycle. So, those are some of the things that are really, really helpful to know about in terms of the benefits of, not only understanding the seasons, not only understanding how to educate people, not only understanding how to take care of yourself, but then also the exact period care products that you're using.
I'm learning so much. This is great. I mean, you started talking about you answered the question I had with the products, but also as with social media and different newer companies embracing the eco-friendly. How do you see the narrative like changing and shifting? I think about social media and how people make fun, or make light of the experience using humor as one phase of, I don't want to say educating, but maybe explaining how they feel in their eye story. I don't know. I don't know them personally, so I can't say. But there's definitely a lot more awareness now with social media.
Yeah, and it's good, right? The increased awareness is good. There is a comedian out there. I'm blanking on his name, but he has a whole little segment on what it was like for him when his daughter started her period, and it's hilarious. It is so funny, like from the male perspective, what that was like. So I'm glad that that's out there. You'll see on various TV shows of the parents scrambling for what to do when the daughter starts her period. It's been on a variety of shows, or trying to broach the conversation. How do we do this? Everyone's sort of nervous. So I'm glad, that those things are out there. And there is more positivity on social media. I tend to follow those positive people who are doing things and talking about how, the use of essential oils and herbs, can be useful, or, various teas can be useful. There's one woman I follow, she has a book on peaceful periods. It's beautiful, the increased awareness. So I would encourage people to follow those versus, because the negative stuff is still there, And I just have to say that, women's bodies and reproductive rights have been politicized since the dawning. And we could have a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole nother podcast.
On that. There are a lot of folks who would not want women to feel, or people who menstruate to feel empowered about their bodies, to, understand their phases and communicate, what they need and what they don't need, and, take stuff off their calendar because they're taking care of themselves. I mean, there are a lot of folks who don't want to see that. There are a lot of folks out there who, see, as I said earlier, periods as repulsive and not to be discussed. There is, I think it's Florida, but there is some legislation around not allowing children to say the word period in elementary school. Like, what? What are we doing? That's disempowerment.
That is not a safe place. Let me say, school is supposed to be a safe place, but I remember, there was I think, I'm not going to say, but basically, pretty much all the girls started at the same time in elementary school. It was the weirdest thing ever. But we had lady teachers, so they were able to, I think that would be so odd to be in elementary school and have that experience and not have a place to actually say the word. Oh my God.
It's a disservice.
Yes.
It's actually a disservice. And I want to say that not all women teachers are compassionate about it either.
That hurt my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Ouch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a whole different podcast. That's,
Right.
I
Because
mean,
they have their
yeah,
own
that's a,
healing to do, right?
yeah. And part of what you provide, I think they should reach out to you to be able to get their own story straight, right? I think because of, folks' story, if they don't understand their own story, then it's going to be really hard for them to even try to help somebody else with X, Y, and Z, right? And I think as you see this, I guess I must just say acceptable in some places, not all places. Give us, I would say, 3 things that we can do. If someone listens to this podcast and they're like, "All right, I hear you. Maybe that we're gonna get to what your future planning going on. Maybe they can't make those dates, but they can actually do the 3 tips you can give them today in regards to how to be able to start that conversation at home. What would you give them?
So for parents, I actually do have a freebie on my website, which is 5 tips to make it easy to talk about. So I'll just share that now if that's okay. So
That's A-okay.
Okay, periodofempowerment.com. If you go to the freebie tab, you can opt in and get that list of 5 things. But for everyone else, I would say if you are a person who does not menstruate and you want to be supportive of your loved ones who do, then ask them what their experience is about. Be open-minded. Have what I call like a childlike mind. Children are really fresh and new and everything is exciting and they're open-minded. So, ask them about their experience. Have a conversation. Ask them how you could be of support. What can you do? That would just be amazing just to start the conversation. So, and be prepared if, that person who menstruates that you ask that question to, be prepared for them to be shocked that you're asking that, right? Because, they may have been brought up to keep everything a secret and keep it hidden. And so they initially may be like, oh, shoot, I'm not supposed to talk about this with you, right? So be prepared for that, but just continue to reiterate that you're coming from a place of love and you want to be of support. So that is something that I would suggest. And then for those who do menstruate, start tracking your cycle. Know your normal. And when I say track, as I mentioned before, of course, you're tracking the days, you're tracking your food intake, you're tracking what you're eating, or you're drinking, but you're also tracking your emotions. Track your triggers. Track the things that have you like excited, and then track, the days when you're just feeling kind of down and maybe you don't know why. And like I said, we keep it real, we keep it 100. So track your bowel movements as well. That's really, really important. How are things flowing, right? So all of that. There's a beautiful book called the Cycle Tracking Journal that helps people. It's a guide. So it takes you through all the stuff to track. So start tracking, and then I would encourage them to have the same commitment that you just shared, which is to start talking about it with other people. Normalizing the conversations is just so key.
Yeah, I really am. I'm just letting you know. I this is great because our family is predominantly women, and so with my sisters, and it's gonna be great. This is gonna be amazing. Now, let's talk about any future stuff. So, any future classes, and then also share what do you think are the main focus on this topic in the next 5 years? Like, what should we be looking out for?
So as far as what's coming up, I would love to develop a workshop for boys, male teens, that from what I have seen is not out there. So that's probably my next step. I would love to also, particularly when it comes, well, actually for all of my programs, but particularly for the Dads Puberty Playbook Masterclass, I would really love to partner with organizations. I have a full coaching. So the Dads Puberty Playbook Masterclass is something that's free. It's a 90-minute virtual training, and for dads, so it's a jump starter, but it's not going to give you everything. And so for dads who want to continue, working with me and working with my Fatherhood Game Changer coaching program, I would really love to partner with more sororities and fraternities and then give back to them, donate 10% of the registration. I would really like to have, some harmonious partnerships, with organizations, perhaps nonprofits, with schools. I would love to see this work. For example, on a weeknight, a school sponsoring this sort of training for dads. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And actually, any of the 3 workshops that I offer could be, marketed by schools. And I would love to be able to donate 10% of the sales to their PTA or whatever fund, that they want it to go to. So those are things that I am looking to do. And then also global expansion. This is really important, not just for the U.S., but I would love to create a global community of fathers who see leaning into this as a normal part of fatherhood, of fathering, right, as excellent fatherhood. So really, really expanding the global community. I think what's coming as far as that question is more research and focus on trans folks who menstruate. So trans guys who are identify as men and menstruate, right? So more focus on their experience of what that's like. So I really want to encourage the trans population to come forth, and share your stories. I actually am working on having a couple of trans folks as a part of my Period Stories project that I mentioned earlier. It's complicated from their words, right? From what they've told me, it's challenging to be able to come forth and talk about this stuff. So some of the trans folks who are participating in my project have, chosen to have their camera off, right, to maintain their confidentiality, because there's a lot of miseducation, undereducation, closed minds, around that. So I'm seeing on the horizon, more research around the experiences of that population.
I am looking forward to all the work you're going to be doing in the future. If I had confetti, I'll throw it at you. But for now, I'm going to clap it up. Dr. Carmen, here on our HHRAC podcast for our Black Women's Media Wellness Project. I'm standing in for Miss Allison. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.